Alright, we are recording. I uploaded a video not too long ago and I received a comment. The comment was from Farron. Farron said, "It's so beautiful." Thank you, Farron. "It's so beautiful. Can you please explain how you got this look with the Kodak 2383 LUTs?" So, this is the look. That's not the look. This is the look. That's the look. I'm going to show you how to recreate that look, what I did, why I did it. But before any of that, I got to teach you how to properly use the film look LUTs on Davinci Resolve, the ones that are offered by Davinci Resolve. So I'll go to LUTs up here to the left. Film looks, I'm going to show you how to use all these LUTs, right? DCI-P3 are for theatrical exports. Rec. 709 is for everything else, for most consumer devices, YouTube, blah, 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 everything. So I did Rec. 709, Kodak 2383, D55. So I'm going to teach you how to properly use them in a non-managed workflow and a managed workflow. I'm going to show you my project settings, what I did. But before I go into the specifics on how I created the video or edited the video, I'm just going to show you how to use the LUTs. Okay, that's the most important part, is how to use the LUTs, and then we can build on top of that. Because some people just care about the LUTs, and that's okay. I'm going to teach you that. I did a lot of research to try to figure this out. It took me a while, but I did figure it out. And for those who are still looking, look no more. I hope this helps you, and if I get anything wrong, please comment down below. Let me know what your process is, how you go about things, and so we can all learn and share information together. But I'm going to start with the regular non-edited image. And I'm going to turn off the camera from Streamlabs so it doesn't get in the way of any of the tools that I may use in Resolve. So let's begin. We will start with the non-managed workflow and how to get the. I'll show you the settings afterwards, but for example, actually I'll show them right now. I'm tripping. So I shoot in 4K. I'm using the Blackmagic 4K cinema camera. So this is B-raw footage. When I put it in the timeline, it's going to be in 4K, but I downscale it to 1920 by 1080 so it could have a smoother playback on my system. So I changed that. What else do I change in the settings? I go to color management, actually general options. S-curve will usually be on. I'll turn the S-curve off because I want to work in a linear form. Camera raw. I forgot to change it, but I keep it on Blackmagic RAW since I'm using Blackmagic RAW. But Davinci Resolve already reads it since it's raw footage, so you don't really got to mess with these, but I do it anyways. And another thing I do in color management, so this is what you're going to start out with if you're doing non-managed. Davinci YRGB, timeline color space. I'll change that to, I work in Davinci Intermediate, Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. So I'm going to show you how to use the LUT in this Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate timeline color space. My output color space, I want it to be in Rec. 709, Gamma 2.4. So I'll put that on there. Another thing I'll do is this will be in trilinear when you first start things up. I like to put it in tetrahedral because I heard it's mathematically correct with multiple LUTs. It's better than the other one. I'm not sure. That's what I've been doing, and it's been working out for me. And I'll also put on make broadcast safe. I'm not sure exactly what it does, but I put that on. But for this specific video, I didn't. So I'm going to leave it off, but in most videos, I'll put that on. So there's our project management settings, which is important because a lot of people don't even show these. But this is what I do. This is the non-managed way to do it, right? This is you telling Resolve, hey, I'll take care of it. I'm going to handle my transforms. Don't touch anything. I'll take care of it. I got it under control. And then I'm going to show you the managed afterwards on how to use the LUTs. So this is non-managed, right? B-raw footage. So where do I start? On the clip level, I'm going to start with the CST, a color space transform. Boom, bop that on. I'm working in Gen 5, so I go Blackmagic Design, Wide Gamut Gen 4.5. My color space, my gamma, I'll do Blackmagic Design, Film Gen 5. Output color space, I'll do Davinci Wide Gamut, because I'm working, this is my working color space, so I'm going to do edits here, after this. Davinci Wide Gamut, then I'm going to go Davinci Intermediate. I'll bring down tone mapping at first, and I'll also take off the white point, because I'm just doing a transform right now. So, that's my input, right? My in, and here's where I'll do a bunch of edits, right? I don't need that many nodes, but here's where I'll do some edits. Oh, excuse me. Now, the important part is getting the LUT on there. What do you do to get the LUT on there in a non-managed workflow? I'm going to go on timeline The reason I'm working it, you can do this here in the clip level. I'm doing it on the timeline because I want it to affect all the clips. So this is what I do for every clip. Every clip will have its own in color space transform. And then I do the timeline out with the LUT, so I don't have to do it on the clip level for every single clip that I got in my project, right, in my workflow. It's gonna take too long, so I'd rather just do that part on the timeline level. So let's add a few notes. My next transform, color space transform. Now that I'm in Davinci Wide Gamma Intermediate, I'm going to go from that to the Cineon Log color space. Davinci Wide Gamut, Davinci Intermediate, output color space. So these LUTs, Rec 709, these LUTs are made for the Cineon Film Log Negative. They're made for this specific color space, gamma. They're made for this specific gamma. So you'll put on Cineon Film Log, that's the important part. And here's where you're going to put on your LUT. I'll pop it on, LUT, go down to Film Looks. Oh, I'm blind, Film Looks. I'm going to do this one, because it's my favorite one. Kodak 2383 D55. Boom! There you go. That's how you use the LUT in a non-managed workflow. And then from there, I'll work back upstream. And I'll start doing things like bringing down the, I can work in HDR, bringing down the exposure a little bit, right? Because it's a little bright. You bring it down and do that. So, I can do that. It's a beautiful image. Check it out. What do you think? That's the starting point. That's what I want. The thing about these LUTs is that they're creative and technical LUTs. So when I add this Kodak 2383 D55, it's transforming. It's doing a creative job, as in like changing the colors, contrast, all these different things, right? But it's also doing a technical job and putting it in a Rec 709 space. So I don't need a CST anymore. I'm fine. I can stop there, and then I can just work. Upstream from here, right? I can work behind that. This is non-managed. Another thing that I do, which you can try, what I did in this actual grade, I'm gonna reset this one, the exposure node, right? Since it seems a little blown out. I do this. Instead of putting in the Cineon Film Log, sometimes I'll put in the RE Log C, which could be a bad move, but from my experiences, they've been coming out really nicely because it adds a shoulder to the top of the curve, right? It'll like do something like this, right? Looks horrible right now. Ignore that. But it'll do something like that to the image. So I'll do this. Check it out. RE Log C, boom. It looks nice. The exposure is fine. So you can either just throw it into the RE Log C output gamma, which isn't what the LUT is made for, but that's what I do sometimes. Or you can do what we previously did, which was the exposure node back here, right? Bring down the exposure. Does the same thing. Maybe do it this way with the Cineon Log, Cineon Film Log output gamma, because it's the proper way to do it. But that's how you handle it in a non-managed workflow. Now, I'm going to reset these. I'm going to show you how to do it in a managed workflow, which is different. And this is what I did for my specific edit. So after I show you this, I'm going to show you the little details and things I did, like FX, like glow, film grain, and whatnot, and how to recreate that look. But now I'm changing my color management, my project management settings. This is what I did for that specific video. I went to Davinci YRGB Color Managed, clicked on this, put on HDR Davinci Wide Gamma Intermediate. I'm basically telling Davinci Resolve, hey, take care of this for me, give me a good starting point, and do most of the heavy lifting for me. So it'll transform it for me, and it'll put it in a Davinci Wide Gamma Intermediate color space already, a timeline color space. The output, it's outputting for Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Remember this is important for the end of applying the LUT when you're using a managed workflow. So I'll save that, boom, we already have a good starting point. So what do I do from here? Everything after this is in the Davinci Wide Gamut color space, right? So I just go straight to the timeline level. I'll add a couple nodes, and now I do the same thing, right? But I'm going Davinci Wide Gamut, Davinci Wide Gamut, Davinci Intermediate, output color space. I'm doing Rec 709, output gamma, Cineon Film Log, taking that off, Here I'm adding my LUT. And you would think, you're like, why does this look so ugly? What's going on here? What's the problem with this image? It's overexposed, has a lot of saturation. I practically did the same things that I did in the other one to this image. What's the problem? The problem is, since you're in a color managed workflow, it's expecting an output of Davinci wide gamut intermediate, not you already transforming it to Rec. 709. What this does here transforms it, anything after this is Rec. 709, and now Davinci Resolve is lost. It doesn't know what to do. So you have to add another color space transform on top of that one, and you're going from Rec. 709, Gamut 2.4, back to Davinci wide gamut and Davinci intermediate. And there it is. Now you have the original look you had before. We can do some exposure, right? Slightly different, slightly minimal, but that's how you do it in a color managed workflow. Now the important part. Now you know how to use a LUT in a color managed workflow and a non-managed workflow. What I did for this specific video is I worked at a color managed workflow. I did all these things. That's how I used the LUT. This is my starting point. Now I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. This is the final image and what I did. So now I'm going to turn off most of my nodes in my node tree, and I'm going to go through it one at a time, aside from the transform. So this is what I'm starting with, right? And I worked upstream from here. First, I did hue and saturation. I changed the hues. I changed the color of the red a little bit. I also made the blue a little more teal. I changed the color of the red because I wanted the skins to come out a little more. And I also changed the teals so I can add a little more teal in the background. You can't really see the differences through YouTube since it's super compressed, but it's bringing more life into his skin tones. I also went into hue versus saturation, and I brought a little more saturation and a little more life into his skin. That's what I did right before the color space transform. I'm building a look right now. Next one, I did color separation. So what I did here, this was hard to explain, but I did a little divide, right? I brought some blue and a little bit of green into the shadows to add more teal in here. If you could see on YouTube, hopefully you can see it adds more teal into the shadows and keeps the highlights slightly warm. It's still a little cold and a little greenish, but that was like the tone that I wanted because I didn't touch the red at all. Brought blue and green into the shadows and a little bit of green into the highlights. Most of the time I would add red into the highlights, and so it'd be like red and green in highlights, blue and green in shadows. But for this specific one, I didn't add the red. And you change the intensity with these sliders over here to the right on the edit section. So it'll normally look like that. It'll normally look like that once I make these small adjustments. But now you can change the intensity of it through these sliders. And what you have to know is 50 is 0. 50 means 0. Anything above 50 is like you're adding to it. Anything under 50 is you're subtracting to it. Right? Keep that in mind. So what I did is I brought down the green to 61. That was a sweet spot that I liked. And I brought down the blue to 75. And that's how I ended with this image right here. Next, after the color separation, I just brought up the shadows. I brought up the shadows in all the images because I wanted that filmic look. Most of those filmic YouTube looks have their shadows raised to have like a faded feeling to it. Now here's what the meat and bones come in. Here's when I go downstream. So I would start with exposure. After I do my timeline look, and I'm excited with that. Most of the times I would do my exposure first, but for this specific image, I didn't change the exposure. I liked it where it was, but I would start with my exposure here. And what you could do with your exposure, if you're working with HDR, you literally can just move the global exposure, bring it up and down. I can do that since I'm in RAW, and it's in and I already told my product settings that I'm working in Davinci Intermediate, Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. Or what you can do also is right-click on your exposure node, go to your gamma, put it in linear, and from there you can work with your gain. Bring it up, bring it down, and this is I guess it's supposed to be photometrically accurate in changing the exposure. I'm not sure if it's more accurate than the HDR tool, but I'll do this from time to time. So exposure's fine, so I'm going to reset that. Next, I do lift, gamma, gain if I wanted to edit that, which I didn't for this specific image. After that, I did a contrast curve, added a small S curve. And there you go. That's a big part right there. Add more depth into the image, right? You'll for sure see these changes on YouTube. So that's off, that's on, that's off, that's on. I did a contrast curve, little S curve, right? Next, LOPF. What this means, Gaussian blur, right? Went into the Gaussian blur, added that effect. I did 0.180, same for horizontal and vertical. My border type is replicate. Global blend. Global blend, I brought it down a little bit to 945. But I don't know if you'll be able to see a difference. It just adds a little bit of blur into the image. It's not as sharp. This is weird. This is like where it gets weird because you have to add blur into the image and then add sharpening afterwards. So I added sharpening afterwards. So now the image isn't super blurry, but it's not super sharp either, and you find a little sweet spot. And what I did to do that is I clicked down here on a little triangle and teardrop. I brought down the blur, which means you're adding sharpness. So the radius, right? So if I bring this up, it blurs it out. If I bring it down, it makes it very, very sharp. So what I did is I had it at 46. I brought it down from 50 to 0.46, from 0.50 to 0.46. And that's how I added sharpness. Next, I did the halation OFX. Effect, halation. These are the parameters I used. I don't know. I didn't use secondary glow, and I didn't use the basic grain. I think I added that afterwards. But here is what I did. You can copy those if you want. That's the halation effect. Off, on, off, on. It's more noticeable in the glasses. Off, on. Next one, the glow. Off, on, off, on, off, on. Simple glow, right? I want that glowy image. I want it to look nice, heavenly. Here are the settings that I used. Copy those, screenshot it, remember it. Next one is I added a gate weave. So you don't have to do this, but I did it to kind of recreate that photochemical look. I'm not going to play since it probably won't play back super smoothly, but these are the settings I use for the gate weave. So I added the camera shake OFX. So go to your effects tab, look up camera shake, toss it on that node. Same thing with like the glow and halation. You look up halation, you look up glow, you look up camera shake, you add them to each of the nodes. And these are the settings I use. So this is the first part. I'm going to scroll down after this. That's the second part. Okay. After that, I would have added a flicker, but I didn't. After that, I added my grain. These are my grain settings. 35mm overlay. I didn't really touch them. I think, I just put the normal one, 35mm. And I didn't change anything, I think. After that, I was going to add film damage, but essentially I didn't. And that's how I created the look. That's how I went from that to this. Can I change it? Let's see. Or if it changes back. Yep. Before and after. Before and after. Effects do a lot. It does a lot to the image. So does the contrast curve. But that's how I recreated this image. But yes, I hope the tutorial was helpful. I hope you learned a lot. But that's how I created this image, and I don't want to keep it away from you. I want everybody to share ideas and share information so we can all work with each other and not gatekeep any knowledge, because a lot of people do gatekeep out there. I saw this guy's video on Instagram, and it was amazing. It was beautiful, and then I asked him how he did it. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell me. He just started saying jokes, some dumb stuff. And then I found out later on, all he did is pull out some greens and some other colors and then add a little bit of contrast. Very simple things. And all you got to do is keep it simple to make a beautiful image. This image, I was messing around, having a good time, but that's how I created it. And I hope you learned a lot. If you have any more questions, or if you have any critiques or feedback for me, definitely leave it down below. I don't plan to make this an editing YouTube channel. I'm kind of just putting up stuff that I do edit and have a good time. I don't plan on making tutorials, but if you do need help, I got your back. And yeah, freaking Turtle School out, right? Let's go. Thanks for watching. Oh man, that's cheesy.